What's your worst dating experience? My best friend set me up on a blind date straight after my divorce. I was 22, yes, 22 and divorced, and she told me I needed a good man. She told me all about how this guy had a good job and he was so nice, blah blah blah. She would not tell me how old he was and would only send me blurry pictures. I felt pressured, so I went. He was nowhere near as attractive as she had made him out to be, and much older than I expected. He looked at me and said, "She didn't tell you how old I was, did she?" Anyway, this guy proceeds to drive me around his property, which is huge and beautiful out in the country in Tien. He takes me up on a mountain on a four-wheeler and proceeds to try to kiss me. I, being terrified I might be murdered out here in the middle of nowhere, he had brought a gun along, let him, and it was one of the worst kisses I have ever had. He then took me down off of the mountain to shoot and critiqued my form the entire time. Then he proceeded to absolutely trash his ex-wife because she turned out to be a lesbian, while walking me around the house they lived in and showing me all of her favorite places and telling me all the things she would do there. He then showed me the house he was living in with his brother, which was basically just a shack. It was awful. I now tell everyone she tries to set up about this experience and let them know not to trust her. Met a girl on Craigslist. This was a long time ago, obviously. After a few messages we set up a date at a bar downtown. I show up and she's already there with a guy friend. No biggie, I'm thinking. She's just playing it safe. They are at a 2-person table and the place is packed. They already have drinks, so I grab one for myself and put it on my tab. Her and her friend proceed to ignore me. Like I say something and neither one acknowledges anything unless I ask a direct question. Even then I get one-word answers with attitude. So I finish my beer, pay my bill and leave without saying a word. Later I get a barrage of messages about how I'm an asshole for sticking them with their own tab. Haha. She thought she was getting a free night of drinking. You done good. He took me to see Cloverfield. Kept putting his hand on my thigh with me putting it back in his lap. He stopped and I thought he got the message. Instead he tells me he's motion sick and we have to leave now. He staggers out of the theater brushing against irritated people in their seats. Outside, he pukes into the popcorn bucket while I stand there mortified. We go back to his car and he tells me he is too sick to drive for a while. I wait a bit trying to think of what to do when I notice him unbuttoning his pants. I ask him what he is doing and he asks if I want to kiss it. Got out of the car and went into the lobby and called my sister to pick me up. He was still sitting in his car when we left 45 minutes later. Holy mother, that was a bad date. The sad thing is he was cute and funny and I was planning on having sex with him that night. The motion sickness was not an issue, but the groping and being a pig just came out of nowhere. Like, why? I agreed to go on a date with an older co-worker from my first job at a supermarket. I was 20, he was 27. He took me to lunch and didn't let me order for myself. When the waitress came to ask what I wanted to drink, he cut me off and placed both my drink and food order. I hadn't even glanced at the menu yet. He proceeded by saying I needed to meet his mom and brother soon and how we should get married and eventually have kids. Mind you, he didn't know a single thing about me. I quit shortly after that and he would message me on social media every now and then saying things like my then boyfriend didn't deserve me until I blocked him everywhere. I was 18 with a plenty of fish profile. Stupid, I know. I got catfished by this dude who was 15, 20 years older. We met at Starbucks and upon seeing him I knew I was out of my depth, but I didn't know what to do, so I went along with the date. He would ask me my interests and then shoot them down. X, you love Harry Potter? I think that is so childish. I knew I needed to nope out, but he kept insisting I go to his place using the fact he bought me a coffee to make me feel guilty. I agreed to go to a park, but that was the most he was going to get. I said I had to drive separate as I had something later, and during the drive I called a friend and asked them to call me in 15 minutes to give me an excuse to bail. At the park he mentioned that he knew he was older and maybe that was why I was acting strange and not wanting to see his great house. but he did it because he felt a connection and knew I wouldn't meet him if I knew he wasn't like his picture anymore, but I should give him a chance. Not long after my bailout call came, and he became so cold it was scary. But I slipped off though after a very awkward hug, and then endured texts of send me pictures of your party, send pics. I don't believe you, lol. Okay, I knew you weren't cool, you were a waste of my life. Y-I-K-E-S. First date with a guy from the gym. Not only did he spend the dinner portion checking out the prom girls whose dates had brought them to the same restaurant, but after he was very excited for me to meet Pedro. He was insistent that I shake hands with Pedro. Told me how sad Pedro was that I wouldn't shake his hand. Petulant even. Pedro was his penis. Was also my last date with Street, Hilaire and his friend Pedro. She ordered a steak to go, then sat quietly and waited for me to finish eating. She didn't want to answer questions and didn't have anything she wanted to talk to me about. See you later, she said as I dropped her off. Not likely, I answered. An edit. For a little more context, I was about a month out of a relationship that ended when my girlfriend of 3 years dropped out of school and quit her job to run away with a sailor she'd met the week before. I finally took a girl out I had been pining after for a long time. She had been in a bad relationship for about 2 years, had a kid with a guy, and they finally broke up. I waited a few weeks and asked her out. She agreed. I picked her up with a teddy bear holding some flowers. She loved them and put them in water immediately. We went to a local sushi place, ate our fill and headed out for a movie. Watched the whole movie together in the theater, flirting and touching the whole time. Afterwards, we went driving around and just talked for about 2 hours before I took her home. We made out on her front steps for probably 20 minutes before we finally peeled ourselves away from each other. I went to bed feeling absolutely fantastic. Woke up the next day and texted her good morning. No reply. Whatever. She had a baby. Figured she was busy. Went about my day. Finally got in Facebook during my lunch break, and she was back together with her ex already. Haven't talked to her since. Immediately trying to drown the teddy bear holding flowers should have been a warning sign. Well, I had a crush on this guy in high school and my friend kept urging me to talk to him. I got the nerve to, and apparently he liked me too. Or so I thought. We talked often and exchanged notes in the hallway. He asked me to homecoming and I said yes. I was so excited. Bought a new dress and everything. Got to the football game and met up with my friend. I finally saw my crush and told him I was gonna go sit with him for the game. He's like, no, you can't. I'm like, why? Him, because I'm with my girlfriend. I was devastated and embarrassed to say the least. Didn't stay for the rest of game or homecoming. Called my dad and he picked me up in front of the school where I was sitting all by myself. It was a date that wasn't. I put in personal ad in the paper, this was back in the day, and agreed to meet this guy at a certain place. He took one look at me and drove away. He never said a word to me. Just look at me and left. I was very upset when this happened. I guess he didn't like the way I look. Met a lovely girl over Tinder. We really hit it off and had a great conversation. Decided to meet in person for coffee the next day. She showed up on time, looked just like her pictures, and brought her boyfriend. A few years ago I met this girl on a dating site who was some sort of zookeeper. She worked with foxes or something. She was nice, friendly, smart, and hot. Had no clue how she could be single until we met up, and I'd found out real quick. She stunk to high heck all the time. It wasn't too noticeable on our first date at a golf place, but she certainly smelled a bit off. At our next date it was almost overpowering. I brought it up and she said, oh no, sorry. Yeah, for the first date I scheduled that after I had 2 days off, so it wouldn't be so bad. It's just that fox musk is impossible to wash off. Asked her if she showered before our dates and she swore she did. It just didn't help, I guess. We didn't last too long. When we toured a wildlife rehab place, they made us put on gloves to go into the fox enclosure and still warned us not to touch anything wet, because if you get a drop of fox urine on your skin you'll have no social life for a week. showing her a video on my phone, and my boy texts me, "Did you duck her yet?" and it pops up on the screen. Pulled out her phone and started playing Clash of Clans. Dating app. Smallish town, Kingston, Ontario. Go on a few boring dates. Q story. Match with girl. She agrees to meet, but there was something odd about the conversation. She was eager to meet. Suspiciously eager. I get to the Starbucks and wait inside for 20 minutes past the agreed meet time. Girl texts me, says she running late. Asks me to stand outside so she can see me as she drives by. I look over and there's another dude standing on the sidewalk with his phone in his hand. Recognize him from the gym. Ask if he's also meeting a girl and what her name is. Turns out the girl was pulling a fast one on us both as revenge for her girlfriend, who we both apparently dated once and didn't like. So him and I went to get ice cream together and sent her a photo of us having a great time. Wish I still had the photo. Started fine with a decent dinner. 1 hour later she grabs me by the neck, looks me in the eye, and says, "I want you to get me pregnant." Feeling completely uncomfortable, I said maybe it's best we call it a night. On the way home, she starts screaming and yelling, then undid her seatbelt and began kicking the shit out of me while I was driving her home. Pulled over, called the police. They came pretty quickly and fortunately took her home. Apparently she was on some kind of drugs and they kicked in right when dinner ended. What a night. He drunkenly told me on my birthday after one date that he loved me. Then he called me a whore because I didn't sleep with him. Wild. I went on a date with a girl in college. Cutie from my class, who I had been trying to get to agree to the date for a while. So I picked her up to drive to dinner. And worth mentioning, I lived in Wisconsin, and it was January, so like 23 outside. Turns out she was bipolar, but refused to take any medication for it, so she had a manic episode while we were driving. Proceeded to undo her belt, open the door, leap out of the car into a snowbank, and started running into the woods. I had to chase her down and convince her to get back in the car with me before she lost her feet to frostbite. We didn't date anymore, but I was able to convince her to start her meds and keep on them through all of college. She's actually a pretty successful software engineer now. Unrelated, but that is one of 3 times a date ended with me in a snowbank on a sub-zero night. Was about a month ago. I invited this guy from Tinder over because he seemed pretty nice and we had a lot in common. He was decent looking on his profile, so why not? For context, I had just moved into my apartment and I don't have a nice setup yet besides a table and a few chairs. The second he walks into my apartment, he asks me why I didn't have any slippers for guests. I was a bit confused, but figured maybe he lived in a fancier household than me, and yes, he made it clear he did. I said I didn't, and we went to my balcony to smoke a joint. He spent 20 minutes bitching about how much he loves and misses his ex-girlfriend. I tuned out and just nodded, but it was strange. We get back in, and he immediately starts grilling me about my lack of furniture. "Where's your TV? Couch?" When I explained that I didn't have the money at the moment to buy nice furniture, he scoffed and just kept nitpicking. I kicked him out within 30 minutes. Went out with a girl I met on a dating site. We met for coffee, got our drinks, sat down, and she forgot how to talk. For almost an hour, I would try to start a conversation and bring up any and all topics I could think of. I tried talking about our jobs, hobbies, families, anything really. Her responses were just oh yeah, that's cool and nice. She wasn't looking at her cell phone, looking out the window, or being distracted. Completely forgot how to have a conversation while staring at me for the hour we were at the coffee shop. It was the shortest and longest date I've ever experienced. After leaving, I hit the McDonald's drive-thru and had a consolation meal to put that bad date behind me. When she got mad at me for wanting to leave when all she did the entire time was mess around on her phone and post selfies of her and her coffee I bought her. Checked her Insta profile later on, she wanted me to follow to boost hers, and the caption was something like "treated myself blessed so good coffee." Literally couldn't hold a conversation at all. So self-absorbed. Wish I had video of that date just to laugh at it again. Oh, There was the time a woman kept pushing for me to take some pills from her all night. She said single mothers only had themselves to blame for sleeping around, and asked me why I had so many minorities in my neighborhood. She eventually took some of those pills at my place, attempted to rape me, then fell down my stairs when I kicked her out. After I kicked her out and blocked her on everything, she spent the next few weeks making fake accounts to harass me for ejecting her and saying I shoved her down the stairs, etc. As a 6'2" male that has worked doors at clubs, bars, never thought I would have a story of a woman trying to date rape me, but yep, I do.